An entire neighborhood smelled what they described to be rotten sausages for years, blamed this rancid smell on a local meat shop. What they were actually smelling was a smell made up from their worst nightmares, and what was revealed to come from something they would not even imagine in their wildest dreams. This next true crime story has no heroes. From police to family members, everyone's either a villain or a victim. This is the horrific story of Anthony Sowell, also known as the Cleveland, Ohio Strangler. Anthony Edward Sowell was born on August 19, 1959, and raised in an abusive home in East Cleveland. But the abuse was never targeted to Anthony. Anthony had a 10-year-old niece who lived with him and his mother due to her mother tragically passing away. Even for the slightest mistake, Anthony's mother made the 10-year-old girl strip nude and then proceeded to beat her ruthlessly with an extension cord.
Ones that endured that type of beating as far as taking off the clothes and being tied up were you and your siblings, correct?
Yes.
All right, but not your brother Robin. He was older, right?
Right, he didn't get it.
All right, so as far as this type of discipline, you, your sister Ramona,
Yes.
your younger sister,
Pearl Hatcher, Darnell, and me and Ramona and Monica.
all right, so you were the only ones that got that type of discipline, correct?
Yes.
And while this was going on, what were you thinking?
Nothing. I just hated it though. We had to like walk around on pins and needles when they come in, you know, try to stay out of their way.
And so while all of this was going on, so Anthony, he wasn't somewhere hiding in a corner, was he?
No.
All right,
No.
he was actually watching this.
Yes, he was.
And you said as far as his discipline, it could take place anywhere from morning, afternoon to 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, correct?
Yes, yes,
And you would have to go to school the next day or later on that day.
yes.
And you explained to us or described for us a time that you actually took some pills to school, correct?
Yes, I did.
All right, and did you ever take those pills?
No.
All right, and so when you were taking these pills, what were you going to do with them?
I thought they would take me out the house. That's why I took them to school.
All right, so you actually wanted to harm yourself.
No, I didn't want to harm myself. I didn't want to take the pills. I just wanted somebody to give me some attention so I can get out the house.
All right, so you're...
This only proved to be the beginning of the young girl's nightmares, as her uncle, 11-year-old Anthony, not only beat her as well, but sexually abused her. The abuse would be carried out for years. Anthony also had additional signs of trouble when he tortured and ended the lives of local animals in many horrific ways, an early trait that is often ignored in individuals who grow up to be terrifying criminals. At the age of 18, Sowell enlisted in the U.S. Marine Corps, where he was actually a good soldier. He served for 7 years and was honorably discharged in 1985 due to an injury. Upon his return to Cleveland, Ohio, Sowell began racking up a criminal record. His first offenses were fairly minor, involving illegal narcotics and alcohol, but he soon turned to domestic violence. In 1989, Sowell bound, gagged, and sexually assaulted a 21-year-old pregnant woman in his home. The pregnant woman was able to survive and tell her side of the story anonymously, stating, "He choked me really hard because my body started to tingle." His victim later recalled, "I thought he was going to end my life." Sowell was arrested and spent 15 years in prison, where he was released in 2005. There was no rehabilitation, there was no change. He actually became worse, and he quickly returned to his life of crime. Anthony Sowell's first victim in his violent spree was a 38-year-old woman named Crystal DOZIER, a mother of 7. DOZIER had started struggling with an illegal narcotic addiction after one of her children had their life ended.
It's like one of my best friends, because every morning she would call me, or every day she would call me and say, "Has anybody told you today that I love you?" Yeah, and there's not no place in this city that she didn't stay where she didn't invite me over to stay with her. The last time that I spoke to Crystal, I was in the hospital. And that was May the 17th of '07. And me and her was on the phone, and I was laughing and talking with her. And she left out that day in a blue van, and she hasn't been seen since.
Anthony Sowell knew Crystal had an addiction, and in May of 2007, Sowell offered her illegal narcotics to lure her into his home, where he sexually assaulted her and ended her life. He had wrapped his hands around her neck so hard that her eyes were missing from her head. For the next 2 years, Anthony Sowell's reign of terror continued, targeting women who he didn't think would be reported missing by loved ones. And tragically, he was correct about some of his victims, who weren't even known to be missing until their bodies turned up on his property months or even years after their lives were ended. However, many of Anthony Sowell's victims were actually reported missing, but police didn't take their families seriously. Rachel DeSalle, a former investigative reporter involved in the case, stated many of the families went to the police, and the police wouldn't even take a report. Police would tell them that if they're using illegal narcotics, they'll come back when they're ready. So as you can see, this case has no heroes. There's no one out there looking for these people who are all reported missing, and Anthony Sowell knew this. He knew no one cared, so this only emboldened him more. It's also unknown how many women could have been saved had the police listened to the victims' families. Unfortunately, it wasn't until October 2009, over 2 years, that Sowell's horrific crimes were uncovered. 2 years of reports going ignored. In September 2009, a woman named LATUNDRA BILLUPS went to Anthony Sowell's home after he promised her narcotics. Once she was inside, he not only beat her, but also assaulted her and choked her with an electrical cord until she passed out. Thankfully, Billups would regain her consciousness, and Sowell actually allowed her to leave. However, perhaps because she was worried about the narcotics in her system, or perhaps Sowell had threatened her, Billups did not immediately go to the police with her story. A month later, on October 20th, another woman named Shawn Morris went to Sowell's home to drink and do narcotics. She initially left without incident, but she realized she left her ID behind and had to turn back. At that point, Sowell attacked her. She managed to escape by climbing out of a third-story window, and Sowell's neighbors called 911 to report a nude woman falling from the home. Police finally sprang into action. Morris also refused to speak to the police, and Sowell was nowhere to be found when the officers arrived. Had Billups not finally decided to follow a report against Sowell the following week, he may have continued his spree of violence. However, Billups' report, in addition to the incident with Morris, allowed authorities to obtain a warrant to search Anthony Sowell's home. And what they found on October 29th would not only horrifically shock them, but it would also stay with them forever. The putrid scent was the first thing to hit investigators. Then they came across 2 decomposing bodies in a shallow grave in Sowell's basement. As their search continued, they uncovered 4 more bodies in crawl spaces, 4 buried in the backyard, and a woman's skull wrapped in a paper bag and stuffed into a bucket inside. Altogether, investigators found at least the partial remains of 11 women. Sowell wasn't home at the time of the search, but he was located and arrested 2 days later on October 31st.
I'm doing my best. Then it ain't like these people came up and told me like the address, like I said.
It's hard for us to believe you don't know what happened.
I don't care what you believe. I don't care what you believe. I came up here
so
and
you
trying to help y'all.
No, you're not. But you're not.
Okay, but because I can't tell you what you exactly what you want to hear. Okay, well.
Well, how do you think you can help us then?
To help you try to identify these people. That's what I'm trying to do. That's what you say you want. So forget it. My thing is reality from fantasy.
You see you doing something with your hands, right?
Yeah.
Okay, what you doing with your hands?
Time.
You having a good time. Party.
I think I choked somebody. That's all I know. That's all I feel. Yes.
You feel that you choked somebody,
right.
But you don't know how many people you choked.
The true extent of Anthony Sowell's chilling crimes would soon come to light during his highly publicized trial. As I stated before, Anthony Sowell's neighbors had complained about a rancid smell in the area that they blamed on a local meat shop owner, Ray Cash. The smells were so horrible that many of the neighbors in the neighborhood would protest in front of Ray's shop, demanding for him to leave. Anthony Sowell's neighbors were horrified to learn that the terrible smell they had complained about for years wasn't coming from Ray's sausages after all. Ray Cash, the owner of the shop, and some of the neighbors testified about the odor at Anthony Sowell's trial. Ray stated, "Because we're in the meat business, people assumed that it was us. But when they walked into our factory, there was no smell like that. It was always outside." Ray Cash stated that he spent over $20,000 on new plumbing fixtures, sewer lines, and grease traps in an effort to stop the stench. Other residents were more appalled at the Cleveland Police Department's handling of the case. The first body to be recovered from Anthony Sowell's home to be identified was that of TONIA Carmichael. She had vanished in late 2008 after telling a friend that she was going to run errands. Carmichael's family reported her missing to police, but officers stereotyped her as a black narcotics user and failed to follow up on any leads, such as Carmichael's car being found in Anthony Sowell's neighborhood. Carmichael's daughter, Donita, said, "People forget about her. They dropped the ball." And she's absolutely right. Never once have I heard news reports of these missing women. No days on end searches or their names in any media. All because of who these women were. They did not deserve their fate. And often more times than not, law enforcement and even some media play as a secondary antagonist in almost all these true crime stories. The families of Sowell's victims eventually sued the city of Cleveland because of how they handle these cases, and the city of Cleveland eventually paid out $1.3 million in settlements to the families. Sowell was ultimately convicted on 81 charges, including assault, kidnapping, tampering with evidence, abuse of a corpse, and 11 counts of ending the lives of these women.
God have mercy on your soul, because I'm not no hateful person. I never believed in death penalty until I met you. I never ever wanted anybody to die like that until I met you.
You will have to answer to God for what you have done, because you didn't give life and you had no right to take life away. But one thing I want you to know, I have to forgive you in order for God to forgive me.
When you are locked away, sitting and rotting in a cell.
The only thing I want to say is that I'm sorry. I know that might not sound like much, but I truly am sorry from the bottom of my heart.
He was sentenced to death, but he passed away in February of 2021 of natural causes. His home was demolished in 2011, and in 2021, a memorial called the Garden of 11 Angels was unveiled on the site to honor the forsaken victims of the Cleveland Strangler. I tell these stories, such as I did in the Barjona case, to show how much change is needed in the judicial and law enforcement systems. People we think of as heroes utterly failed 11, if not more, of these women, all because of their background. Unfortunately, this is not the first story of something like this, and sadly will not be the last until change occurs. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this channel and want to see more, please subscribe and hit that notification button. Also, if you are subscribed, please comment, like, and share. It's a fight and struggle with YouTube's algorithm, so anything helps move it along to a wider audience. Thank you again.